What a party peeps, my name is Roby D, and let's get into it. Today, let's talk about how I set up my M50 Mark II or your M50 setup so I can feel a little more like a DSLR camera. So you'll see me looking down here quite a bit. I'll have another camera here that's kind of looking down, but I'm also going to record here. Let's see if we can get this all set up. And that's why this looks a little more complex as you see on this other camera. Just make sure it's in focus. That's why on this camera you see it just a little bit more complex than what your camera may look like. Don't worry about this other junk. It's just so I can record. All right, without further ado, let's go. All right, so right now this is set up how I currently run. So I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna hit here, and I'm gonna reset everything. I'm gonna reset, yeah, clear all camera settings. Here we go. Man, I'm doing this for y'all. I hope y'all love me because I mean, obviously love you guys because I'm sacrificing my camera for y'all. See, when you first get your camera out the box, it's gonna be on green square. Green square, as we talked about in another video, it's just gonna be the most automatic mode. When I go to take a picture, it's gonna beep. The very first thing I'm gonna do before I do anything, I don't care if I'm just borrowing somebody's camera and they have it on green square, the very first thing I'm gonna do is get it off green square and go to AV mode. AV is my preferred mode for shooting. AV is just aperture priority, which means I can control how big or small the aperture is. I love my aperture priority, as most photographers do. So that's going to be where we start, is getting off of green square. Now let's go through and start setting up some real stuff. So we'll go page by page. I think the first time I saw this was maybe like the 70D, where they started giving a more guided tour on all of these settings. So I'm going to take off guided. The very first thing I'm going to do, take off guided, and let's go to standard. I'm going to disable the guide mode. Now, you may want to leave this on. It's actually not a horrible setting. To me, I just don't need it, and it's extra clutter. But you can leave this on or off, your choice. I'm going to disable it, and then I'm also going to disable the feature guide. All right, so we'll go from the top. The first thing I'm going to do is set up my large JPEG plus RAW. So I always shoot in RAW mode. That's just my preference. I edit everything in Lightroom. Your dial here, this top dial, is how you control that setting. If you see that it looks like a half sun coming up, and then it's going to be your back dials here, or your punch pad, your D-pad, if you will, like from a controller, in order to set up or in order to move the arrows left and right. So I'm going to leave JPEG on, and I'm going to go for RAW. C-RAW is just a lighter RAW. I use it if I'm getting low on space, but for the most part, I just shoot on RAW mode and move on. All right, so you do have to hit the set button in the middle in order to confirm. If I go RAW and then I hit anything else, like if I let's say, let me go back to the beginning. So it was set up like this. So I'm going to go into the RAW mode, or I go into my settings, and I want to change RAW, and I say, okay, I'm going to change to RAW, and I hit the, let's say, half press the button, or don't hit OK, then it's not going to be set. So make sure you do that. All right, we're going to set that. I'm going to keep my aspect ratio 3.2, no problem. Exposure compensation is a really cool setting. We're going to leave that as it is. But let's say, for example, you would use this if I'm taking maybe a picture of a sunset, and or in a really high contrast situation, when I want to make sure I get like the brightest clouds and some deep shadows. You'll click in here. You would twist the sun dial looking wheel, and you will hit set. When you take a picture, it's going to take a middle picture, a underexposed picture, and an overexposed picture. But for the most part, you want to leave this off. Here I am going to go to 12,000, just because I want to get a little bit more out of the camera. I know people that just absolutely hate noise in their pictures. For me, it doesn't matter that much. I'm just going to go with it. Now, for the auto lighting optimizer, I'm just going to leave this as is. I have found, surprisingly enough, that I think that the M50 has a really good dynamic range, but I was taking some pictures recently, maybe I'll show them here, where I was surprised with how much I could recover from the M50 sensor. Oh man, I hope I don't break my, hope I don't break something here. All right, there we go. All right, so for the highlight tone priority, I do leave this off. I've tried it before. Maybe it makes some difference. The problem is you have to start at, if you want to enable this, you can't get your ISO lower than 200. And I often use ISO 100 just to get darker. So I always disable that setting unless I'm in a scenario that I really think is going to be necessary. I think I've tried it in a snow before and maybe it's made some difference, but definitely play with it on and off, but it's not something I leave on all the time. Actually going to leave most of this the same. We're going to leave the white balance on auto white balance. I recently I've been using on my R6. I've been using the auto white balance with priority, and I've actually have been having better results there. I'll leave all these the same. Picture style. This is another one that I definitely change. I always use faithful. This is kind of an old school recommended one. It tones down a lot of things. It takes down the sharpening. It takes down some of the contrast. For the most part, it doesn't really matter. Picture style is it's going to be baked into your JPEGs, not into your raw file, so it doesn't really matter. But if I am going to use a JPEG, I don't want it to be over processed. I don't make any changes here. We're just going to skip past all of these. All right, so I always use one shot. All right, so we're just going to leave this on. This is going to be another one of those that is going to be a use case specific setting. For the most part, if you pick up my camera, AF method is probably going to be face with tracking. But I will, if I'm going to switch to anything else, it's probably going to be spot AF. These are my two settings. Eye detection enabled. I don't think the M50 has this setting. Only the M50 Mark II and some other cameras obviously, but the M50 Mark II specifically has this, and I highly recommend it. It's amazing. It works very well. I cannot, this is almost reason enough to upgrade alone. The eye tracking with it's just really good. Continuous AF. We'll leave that on. Touch track setting. This is another one that I highly recommend using. I enable it right away. Touch track, we're going to enable it to the right. It's an amazing setting. Definitely use it. I can't show you how it works because I'm recording right now. The back screen is disabled because of the way it's set up. But imagine it's a touchpad on your MacBook Pro and you just use it as a drag and touch mouse, really, and it's amazing. It works great. This is another one that has to go. All right, so AF beam. This is that little yellow light that you see on the front of your camera. I always disable that. There's another setting, that beep, that we're also going to disable. All right, so let's move on. What else do we change? So for drive mode, I often keep it on low continuous. High is just too fast. Oftentimes in scenarios when I'm taking a picture, I may have a situation where I just want to make sure that I got the picture. And instead of just, pressing the button over and over again, I found that holding it down and getting 3 shots, bam, 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 is really nice. And it's probably that middle expression that I want to get and want to keep. Another really good time to use that is if you're in a low light setting where you may have some camera shake. Brace yourself really tight and hold the button, and you'll find that the first picture and the last picture of you pressing the button and coming off the button, you'll probably find that it's going to be a little bit shaky, but some of those in the middle may come out relatively still. So touch shutter, this goes on and on. So this is when it shows up on the back of the screen. You can also disable it just for the back of the screen. It is nice to have. I really like this. I would probably say by default I leave it disabled, but it's enabled 40% of the time. I use it a lot. This is another one that I highly recommend disabling. It's a little bit jarring to take pictures, and then as you're taking a picture, the picture is coming up in the viewfinder. It's kind of irritating, so I disable review. I can just hit the play button whenever I need to. Exposure simulation. I do, for the most part, enable exposure simulation. There's very few times that I don't, but if I'm shooting manual, I'll disable it. But for the most part, when shooting AV, exposure simulation is really nice. The shooting information, I guess if I was going to change anything here, and I've never checked this out, it will probably be to disable some of these. When I'm just trying to toggle through and get back to the setting that I want, it's like I gotta go through 5 different screens. So if I was to make any change there, it'll probably disable some of the screens that are there, and that would be that. All right, so move on. Always shoot HD, and 29 is okay with me. Auto, I do change this to manual, and I set the record level somewhere in the middle, somewhere closer to here. I've had issues with the auto. I'm sure it does a much better job now, but this just goes back to older cameras that I've had issues with the manual settings or with the auto settings. So I've forever just went to manual, and I have to monitor it whenever I'm shooting video. All right, so auto ISO settings for video, it's already set to 12,000, which I'm okay with. These are, I don't mess with those at all. All right. Almost to the end. I don't change any settings here. I never use any of these things at all, ever, ever, ever. All right, so in here, I love the Wi-Fi capabilities of the Canon cameras. It's not perfect. It doesn't work all the time, but I do like the settings a lot for the phone. I love being able to transfer pictures on the go and tag stuff. The Wi-Fi settings are great. Here's another one that I do change, auto rotate. So instead of auto rotating on the camera, I'm just gonna auto rotate only on the computer. And there we go. This is another one that this is probably the first thing I'm going to disable is this beep. It's so annoying. So disable power settings. This is going to be another one that I change. I'm going to have one setting. If I'm doing video, I'm going to start changing some stuff here. So for example, I may have display still turn off after a while, but I may disable the auto turn off if I'm doing video. The reason I have this set up the way it is I never turn off my cameras. If you pick up my cameras, they're always going to be turned on. So let's go display off 1 minute, auto off in 1 minute. I figure if I aggressively set up my power savings modes, then it'll give me the extended battery life that I'm looking for versus having to turn off my camera all the time and wait for it to turn on to boot up. And of course, the Achilles heel of this camera is the battery life. It sucks. It's bad. There's no way around it. So set up your power savings pretty aggressively and you should be okay. I just realized I left my AirPods in. I apologize. All right, let me take these out. Put them over here. My bad. All right. AirPods out. Eco mode. I have set this up. This is really aggressive. If you turn this on, man, it turns off your camera. If I'm going for a hike and I know I'm going to be going for a long time, I only have 2 or 3 batteries with me, definitely turn this on. Another thing, off topic but on topic, is just pick up a bunch of batteries. Go on Amazon, go on B&H Photo, and buy the batteries. You'll find a bunch of times that they have the batteries with a charger that comes along with it. I'll link to some of the ones that I've used in the past. Just get batteries. They're relatively small. Throw a few in your pocket. Put them in your pocket is no big deal at all. I would recommend at least going out. If you're going to be out for a whole day, at least 3 batteries. 4 is probably ideal, but at least 3 fully charged batteries every time you go out will normally get you through a whole day. All right. So let's go back. So there's a couple of things I may want to come in here and change. This is a really cool thing that you'll find. So there's a way that you can use old lenses. So like you see, I have this Minolta camera. I'm sorry, I have this Minolta camera over my shoulder here. I can use these old lenses on your modern camera. It gives you a different look. There's something just fun about it. I find anyway. It slows me down for sure since I have to use manual focusing and they feel better. Like the manual focusing, those feel so much better. You would have to set up release shutter without lens because it doesn't know that there's a lens on there. So you have to enable release shutter without lens. With all of these settings in here, the only thing I really changed, although you can come in here and you can make a lot of changes, I'll definitely play with them to your heart's content. The only change that I've made is release shutter without lens, just so I can use these older lenses. If you don't have an older lens, don't worry about that section at all. And then finally, let's get into my favorite portion of the Canon cameras, and this is the My Menu area. So My Menu, you can come in here, you can set up, I don't know, a couple of settings or a couple of slots. So these are things that I use often because I do shoot manual flash photography, like in a studio setting. Exposure simulation doesn't work in that setting, so I wanted it to be quickly available to me, so I can quickly come in here and enable and disable under the My Settings mode. We have the power savings. I also change here because doing video, I may need to enable or disable it at any given time. Exposure compensation, this is another one that I said, like, it's a very use case scenario type setting, so you want to have the ability to get to that really quickly. Time lapse is another one that I like to play with, but you have to be in the video mode in order to use that one. We're going to select item to register. So let's say you want to add another one, such as, let's go white balance. And we're going to go white balance here, and you'll see that you can now have custom white balance as another setting that you can quickly get to without having to dig into the menus. All right, so the last thing we're going to talk about is this My Menu display. By default, your menu display is going to be set to normal, which means that it's going to go to the last menu that you're on when you were browsing the menus. So for example, let's go and we're going to browse through and say, okay, let's stop at the shutter button for movies, right? And then I have pressed the shutter button and we get out of menus and I'll go back and it's still going to be in that setting. So what I want, I don't need to get into the last one. I want to get into my menu tab. It's just my place that I jump off from all the time. So we go there and then we're going to half press the shutter button and we're going to go to my menu tab. So let's go back here again. We're going to go back to half press the shutter button, or we're going to press the shutter button functionality for movies. And we're going to hit menu again to get out of it. And when we hit menu, we're back at the My Menu. And you do that on a second tab here under My Menu display. And this is just my preference. I never use the only menu tab. That one just seems weird. But the My Menu tab is definitely where it is at. So we'll go anywhere we want to, half press, jump back in here, and we're at the My Menu tab. All right, so hopefully that was helpful with how to set up your Canon M50 or M50 Mark II with just the settings that I use. This, to me, is a really good setup for both photography and videography. This is the settings that I just run with when I'm out on the road, I'm taking a vacation, or if I'm at a wedding, right? So this is just how I set up my camera. So each setting obviously has a reason why I use it. Go here, maybe this is your starting point. You can jump off from here and figure out other settings that you like better, of course. But hopefully this was useful and helpful to you. If you have any comments, please leave them down below. And thank you very much. Take care.